right, so now that we have gone over a quick little review of what is ATP, what is ADP, and how do animals or organisms in general obtain energy, now we're going to talk about photosynthesis. So this is kind of a generalized overview in this section 9.2, and then 9.3, we're going to go a little bit deeper. All right, so chlorophyll and chloroplast. So light energy from the sun must be captured for photosynthesis to occur. Sunlight is white light, which is a mixture of a bunch of different wavelengths, right? And then photosynthetic organisms capture energy from sunlight with pigments. The main one would be chlorophyll. And chlorophyll has a green color to it, which is why pretty much everything that photosynthesizes is green. Now there are some different colors in chlorophyll, which I'm hoping I'll be able to do a little demonstration for you guys on that. All right, so let's go into chloroplasts. So photosynthesis takes place inside the organelle called chloroplast. Hopefully you remember this from when we did the cell, and specifically cell city, hopefully. So here's a plant cell, right? We can see the cell wall. You can see all the organelles are grayed out basically, except for the chloroplasts, which are these green blobs, right? And inside the blobs are these stacks, okay? So those are the chloroplasts. Now, the chloroplast structure itself, I mentioned these stacks. Now, these stacks, these individual little discs, are called thylakoids, all right? And a stack of thylakoids is called a granum. Okay, so if you look here, they have the thylakoids cut in half. So the edge or the membrane on the thylakoid is called the thylakoid membrane, right? And then the area that the thylakoids exist in is called the stroma. So the stroma is the fluid that the thylakoids granum all float in. If we equate that to a cell, it would be similar to the cytoplasm. All right, so let's continue on. Electron carriers, the high energy electrons that are produced by chlorophyll are highly reactive and they require a special carrier molecule. And the carrier that plants use is NADP+. So plus means it has a charge, right? So it's going to attract those electrons. And when it does, it's also going to bind a hydrogen ion. And that's going to convert it into NADPH. So if you think of the high energy electron as being similar to a hot coal, you would use a pan to carry a hot coal. So NADP plus carries pairs of electrons and that hydrogen ion from place to place. Plant cells treat high energy electrons much in the same way. Instead of a pan, they use NADPH or high energy electrons carriers to carry electrons from chlorophyll to other molecules. All right, so an electron carrier is a compound that can accept a pair of high energy electrons and transfer them along with most of their energy to another molecule. NADPH, like I have said, is the most common one. It can carry the high energy electrons that were produced by light absorption in chlorophyll to chemical reactions elsewhere in the cell. So that chemical reaction that we're talking about in this case would be photosynthesis, which is where plants use the energy of sunlight to convert water and carbon dioxide into high energy sugar and oxygen. So the formula is not too terribly complicated, but we have sugars, okay, are produced, which sugars in this case are C6H12O6. We have carbon dioxide, which is CO2. In this case, we have 6 CO2. We have water, which is H2O, so we have 6 H2O. And then what is produced on the other side, oxygen, we have 6 O2. So you'll notice there's 6 of everything except for the sugars. There's only one of these sugars. Let me go ahead and fill those in. So if you look at this, sugar has a lot of hydrogen, right? It has a lot of carbon, it has a lot of oxygen. It's a high energy molecule, and this is the reason that we need 6 H2Os and 6 carbon dioxides in order to create a sugar. If you look, this 6 CO2 means that we have 6 carbons and we have 12 oxygens just in that carbon dioxide molecule. So when we look at what's produced, here are those 6 carbons. Now the oxygens, we use 6 of them here, and the other 6 that come from here combine with 6 oxygens from H2O to make 6O2. Same thing here, the 6H2, that's going to be 12H, okay, and here are those 12H. Now, this entire process can only happen in the presence of light. So light is not a reactant, it is not a product, right? But the reaction only happens in the presence of light, which is why we indicate it above the arrow here. So photosynthesis has 2 major sets of reactions. We have light dependent and light independent. So light dependent requires light, right? So if we look here, you'll see light comes in. Light dependent reactions happen in the thylakoid, right? And light dependent reactions happen in the stroma, and they don't require any light. All right, so light-dependent reactions require the direct involvement of light and light-absorbing pigments. And the other thing required for the light-dependent reaction is water, okay? And then the light-dependent reaction puts out, as a byproduct, oxygen. Now, the light-independent reaction requires the one reactant that's left, which is carbon dioxide, and then it produces sugars and other carbohydrates, but mainly sugars, right? That's what we're looking at, that C6H12O6 sugar. So here's what that looks like in a big scale. So we have our light-dependent reactions. We have light and water going into the thylakoids. It is charging up this NADPH and this ATP. Okay, and what is being released is this oxygen. Now, if you remember, these hydrogens are being bound to the NADPH. Okay, the light-independent reactions are bringing in carbon dioxide. They're using that energy and those hydrogens, and they're creating sugars. And you can see this is a constant cycle. So NADPH is charged, it comes over, that energy and those hydrogens are used, and what's put back out is NADP+, goes back over to the thylakoids where it gets recharged, okay? And same thing with ATP. It's charged in the thylakoids, the process in the stroma depletes the energy, breaks off that last phosphate, and then they go back, the ADP goes back to the thylakoids to get recharged. So light-dependent and light-independent reactions have an interdependent relationship. One cannot function without the other. All right, so that is where we're going to stop for 9.2. I will have a question in the Google Classroom assignment for you to answer, and then feel free to move on to 9.3. As always, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out. I am here to help.